Commander Yoon stared at the burning planet through the thick glass of his ship's viewing window. The world below had once been beautiful, with blue oceans and green forests. Now it was covered in fire and smoke. The cities that had sparkled, like jewels just hours before, were now nothing but ash and ruins. "Sir, the final count is ready," said Lieutenant Han from his computer station. His voice was steady, but his hands shook slightly as he read the numbers. 23 million dead. Survivors are asking for mercy. Yoon nodded slowly. Felt no joy in the destruction, but no sadness either. This was simply how things worked in the galaxy. The Cathara Dominion had ruled for 3,000 years, and they ruled through fear. When a world refused to pay their taxes or questioned their orders, an example had to be made. "Send word to the other colonies in this sector," Yoon ordered. "Show them these images. Make sure they understand what happens when anyone thinks they can resist us." The planet below was called Zalani. Its people had been peaceful farmers and artists. They grew beautiful crystals and made music that could make listeners cry with joy. But they had made one terrible mistake. They had asked why they needed to give half of everything they owned to the Dominion. They had wondered aloud if maybe they could keep more of their food and resources for their own children. That question had sealed their fate. The Dominion's war machine was like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. Their ships were massive, each one the size of a small city. They had weapons that could destroy entire moons with a single shot. Their soldiers were trained from birth to follow orders without question. For 3,000 years, no one had been able to stand against them. Yoon walked through the corridors of his flagship, the Eternal Blade. The ship was so large that it took 20 minutes to walk from one end to the other. Thousands of soldiers lived and worked inside its metal walls. They came from dozens of different worlds, all of them conquered by the Dominion and forced to serve. In the war room, Admiral Kong was waiting for him. Kong was an older man with scars covering half his face. He had been fighting the Dominions, wars for 40 years, and had never lost a single battle. "We have new orders," Kong said without looking up from his star charts. "There's a small system on the edge of the galaxy. One planet with intelligent life. They call themselves humans." Yoon studied the information on the glowing screen. The system was tiny compared to the great empires they usually conquered. One yellow star with several planets orbiting around it. Only the third planet showed signs of life. "What's their technology level?" Yoon asked. Primitive Kang replied, with a slight smile. "They haven't even learned how to travel faster than light. They're still using chemical rockets to barely reach their own moon. Weapons are simple projectiles and explosive devices." Population? About 8 billion. They're divided into many different countries and governments. No unified leadership. Intelligence reports suggest they spend most of their time fighting each other over resources and territory. Yoon almost laughed. 8 billion people who couldn't even work together to explore their own solar system. It would be like stepping on an anthill. "What are our orders?" "Standard subjugation protocol," Kong said. "But Command wants this to be a training mission for the new recruits. Use minimal force. After what happened to the Zalani, most species surrender as soon as they see our ships." The two officers looked at the tactical display showing the human world. It was blue and green, covered in water and clouds. It looked so small and helpless, spinning in the darkness of space. "They call their planet Earth," Kong continued. "Intelligence says they have some interesting resources. Good farming land, fresh water, and several useful metals. Once we integrate them into the Dominion, they'll make decent workers." "How long until we arrive?" 3 days. "I want you to lead the mission personally. Consider it practice for the bigger campaigns coming." "Next year?" Yoon nodded and studied the planet one more time. Earth looked peaceful from this distance. He wondered if the humans knew what was coming for them. Did they look up at their stars at night and wonder if they were alone in the universe? Soon, they would have their answer. In 3 days, 50 of the Dominion's finest warships would appear in their sky. The humans would see technology beyond their wildest dreams. They would face a choice that every intelligent species in the galaxy had faced at some point: surrender and live as slaves, or resist and die as heroes. Based on everything Yoon had seen in his 30 years of service, He was confident he knew which choice they would make. Fear was a powerful motivator, and the Dominion had perfected the art of making entire worlds afraid. As he walked back to his quarters, Yoon began planning the mission. It would be quick and clean. The humans would surrender within hours of seeing the Dominion fleet. By the end of the week, Earth would be just another conquered world, and its people would be working to feed the endless hunger of the Galactic Empire. He had no way of knowing that this routine mission would be different from all the others. The Dominion fleet appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system like a swarm of metal giants. 50 massive ships materialized from the darkness of space, each one larger than anything humans had ever built. Their hulls gleamed with a cold, silver light that seemed to swallow the warmth of the distant sun on Earth. Every satellite and radio telescope suddenly screamed with alarm signals. Scientists and military officers around the world stared at their screens in disbelief. The ships were enormous, each one easily 10 times bigger than Earth's largest space station captain. Lee stood on the bridge of the Earth Defense Force ship, Harmony. It was humanity's most advanced vessel, but compared to the alien fleet, it looked like a tiny boat next to a fleet of aircraft carriers. Lee was a calm woman who had spent 20 years preparing for this exact moment, though she had always hoped it would never come. "Captain, we're getting signals from all over the world," reported Communications Officer Park. His voice was tight with nervousness. "Every government wants to know what we should do." "And what are our orders?" Lee asked. "Try to talk to them. First, fight only if we have to." Lee nodded. It was what she had expected. Humanity had always preferred words to weapons. Even when facing the impossible, suddenly every screen on the bridge flickered to life. The face that appeared was not human. It had pale gray skin, sharp cheekbones, and eyes that seemed to hold the coldness of deep space. When it spoke, the words came in perfect Korean, then English, then 17 other Earth languages. "Primitive beings of the third planet," the alien said. His voice was deep and carried the weight of absolute authority. "I am Commander Yoon of the Cathara Dominion. Your world has been selected for integration into our empire." Lee felt her heart racing, but she kept her face calm. Around her, the bridge crew watched in silent terror. "You have one rotation of your planet to surrender completely," Yoon continued. "Prepare lists of your population and resources. Any resistance will result in the total destruction of your species." To prove his point, Commander Yoon gave an order to his fleet. Beams of brilliant light shot out from the alien ships, striking several large asteroids floating in space. The rocks simply vanished in flashes of white fire. Then, without warning, one of Jupiter's moons exploded into a cloud of glowing dust. The demonstration was clear. The aliens could destroy anything they wanted with ease. Lee took a deep breath and activated her ship's communication system. She knew that billions of people on Earth were watching and listening. Whatever she said now would determine humanity's fate. "Commander Yoon," she said in a steady voice, "I am Captain Lee of Earth. We thank you for making contact with us. Always happy to meet new neighbors in the galaxy." On the Dominion flagship, Lieutenant Han looked at his commander with surprise. Most species either surrendered immediately or begged for mercy after the demonstration. These humans were doing neither. However, Lee continued, "We must respectfully decline your offer to join your empire. We prefer to govern ourselves. Instead, we offer you safe passage through our system. You're welcome to trade with us or simply continue on your journey to other worlds." The silence that followed seemed to last forever, on ships throughout both fleets. Soldiers and officers stared at their communication screens in disbelief. "Commander," Yoon's laugh was like the sound of breaking ice. "Did this primitive just refuse our generous offer?" "It appears so, sir," Han replied quietly. "And did she suggest that we should leave their system?" "Yes, sir." Yoon's amusement quickly turned to anger. In 3,000 years of galactic conquest, no species had ever spoken to the Dominion with such casual defiance. The humans weren't even begging or trying to negotiate. They were simply saying no, as if they had any choice in the matter. "Captain Lee," Yoon said, his voice now cold with rage. "Perhaps you don't understand the situation? We have 50 warships." "You have what?" "Appears to be a collection of metal scraps barely capable of reaching your own moon. We have weapons that can destroy planets. You have primitive projectile weapons." "We understand perfectly," Lee replied calmly. "We simply choose to remain free." "Freedom is not a choice we offer," Yoon snarled. "Since you refuse to surrender, we will take your world by force. Your species will serve the Dominion as slaves, and your planet will become a mining colony." "We're sorry to hear that," Lee said. "But our answer remains the same." Yoon cut the communication and turned to his tactical officer. "Prepare all weapons. Target their orbital installations first, then their major cities. Make it quick." As the Dominion fleet moved into attack formation, Captain Lee spoke quietly to her crew. "All stations prepare for battle. Send the activation codes to all hidden installations. It's time to show our visitors what humans do when someone threatens our home." Deep in secret bases throughout the solar system, weapons that had been hidden. 4 decades began to power up. Humanity had been preparing for this day for 30 years, ever since they first detected signs of the Dominion's expansion pattern. While they appeared primitive to outside observers, they had been developing something their enemies couldn't imagine. The age of Earth's innocence was about to end. But the age of humanity's true strength was about to begin. The first wave of Dominion fighters roared toward Earth like angry wasps. Commander Yoon watched from his flagship as hundreds of his best pilots streaked through space, their weapons charging for what should have been an easy slaughter. The human ships looked so small and helpless, floating near their blue planet. "This will be over in minutes," Yoon told Lieutenant Han. "After we destroy their pathetic fleet, we'll land and round up the survivors." But as the Dominion fighters closed in on Earth's orbital defenses, something impossible happened. What had looked like empty space suddenly came alive with hidden weapons. Massive installations rose from inside hollowed-out asteroids like sleeping giants waking up. Gun barrels the size of buildings emerged from rocks that had seemed completely normal just moments before. The railguns fired first. Projectiles accelerated to incredible speeds, shot through space faster than the Dominion pilots could react. The lead fighters simply vanished, turned into clouds of superheated metal before they even knew they were under attack. "What? What just happened?" Han stammered, staring at his sensors in confusion. More weapons revealed themselves throughout the asteroid belt. Torpedo launchers that had been disguised as mining equipment opened fire with weapons that seemed to phase right through the Dominion's energy shields. Defense platforms that looked like space junk suddenly bristled with gun turrets and missile pods. "Impossible," Yoon whispered as his tactical display filled with red warning symbols. "How do they have this technology?" "Our intelligence said they were primitive." Captain Lee's voice crackled across the communication channel, calm and steady, despite the chaos of battle. "We've been watching you for 30 years, Commander. Every battle you've fought, every tactic you've used, every weakness in your ships. We know how you fight because we've studied every move you've made." The truth hit Yoon like a physical blow. While the Dominion had grown lazy and overconfident after 3,000 years of easy victories, the humans had been preparing. They had observed the Dominion's expansion across the galaxy and realized that contact was inevitable. So they had done what humans do best. They had adapted and planned for the worst possible outcome. From the outer planets, more Earth defenses activated. Jupiter's remaining moons revealed themselves to be massive weapon platforms. Saturn's rings weren't just ice and rock. They were filled with automated defense drones that swarmed toward the Dominion fleet like a cloud of angry metal insects. "Sir, we're losing ships faster than we can count them," Han reported, his voice cracking. "With panic, their targeting systems are predicting our maneuvers before we make them." On Earth, Admiral Kim watched the battle from a command center buried deep beneath a mountain. She had spent decades preparing for this moment, working with the brightest minds on the planet to develop weapons and tactics that could defeat a technologically superior enemy. "All units execute pattern Delta 7, Kim ordered into her microphone. "Show them what happens when you threaten our children." The human ships moved in ways that confused the Dominion commanders. Instead of following rigid formation patterns, like every other military in the galaxy, each Earth vessel acted independently. Captains made split-second decisions based on what they saw happening around them, adapting their tactics in real time. Commander O, piloting the Earth-ship Defiance, rolled his vessel under a Dominion cruiser and fired a spread of quantum torpedoes directly into its engine section. The massive alien ship shuddered and began to drift, its power systems failing. "Captain, how did you know their weak point was there?" asked his weapons officer. "I didn't," O replied, pulling his ship into a tight turn to avoid return fire. "But I noticed their energy readings were strongest in that area, so I figured that's where their main power core must be located." This was the difference that the Dominion couldn't understand. While their forces followed predetermined battle plans created by distant commanders, human forces thought for themselves. Every ship captain was trained to observe, analyze, and improvise based on the unique conditions of each moment. As more Dominion ships fell to Earth's defenses, something else began to happen throughout the galaxy. Species that had lived under Dominion rule for generations were watching the battle through intercepted communications. For the first time in 3,000 years, they saw the impossible. The mighty Cathara Dominion was losing. On the former, Zalani colonies, survivors gathered around communication devices to watch their oppressors being defeated by a species they had never heard of. Similar scenes played out on hundreds of worlds across dozens of star systems. "The spell is broken," whispered an old Zalani woman, as she watched a Dominion dreadnought explode in brilliant fire. "They can be beaten." In the solar system, Commander Yoon realized that his perfect military machine was falling apart. His rigid tactics were useless against an enemy that refused to fight by the rules. His superior technology meant nothing when the humans seemed to know exactly how it worked and how to counter it. "Sir, should we withdraw?" Lieutenant Han asked quietly. Yoon stared at the tactical display, showing the wreckage of his once mighty fleet. In 30 years of military service, he had never even imagined such a defeat was possible. The humans hadn't just fought back, they had outhawed and outfought the galaxy's greatest military force. For the first time in Dominion history, retreat was the only option. News of the impossible spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. On 1,000 worlds, in 1,000,000 homes, people gathered around communication devices to witness something they had never thought they would see. The Cathara Dominion was running away from a battle. Captain O chased the retreating Dominion cruiser through the outer edges of the solar system. His ship, the Defiance, was much smaller than the alien vessel, but it was also much faster and more agile. The human crew worked together like a well-trained team, each person making decisions without waiting for orders from above. "Captain, we're getting a message from the Zalani Resistance," reported Communications Officer Choi. Her voice was excited. "They want to know how we're beating the Dominion." "Ships. Send them everything we can," O replied, rolling his ship to avoid a blast from the enemy's rear guns. "Technical specifications, tactical manuals, whatever they need." This was perhaps the most shocking thing about the humans. Instead of keeping their military secrets to themselves, they were sharing them freely with anyone who wanted to fight. Back against the Dominion was something no one in the galaxy had ever seen before. On the mining world of Korvac, slaves who had worked in the Dominion's factories for generations suddenly stopped their machines and gathered around smuggled communication devices. They watched in amazement as human ships danced around the massive Dominion vessels, striking like lightning and disappearing before the enemy could respond. "How are they so fast?" asked an old Korvac miner, his voice filled with wonder. "They don't fight like the Dominion," replied his daughter, who had been secretly studying human transmissions. "The Dominion commanders sit in their command centers and give orders to their ships. But the human captains are right there in the battle, making decisions themselves." This was the key difference that was changing everything. The Dominion's military was built like a giant pyramid, with all decisions flowing down from the top. If you cut off the head, the body became helpless. But human forces were different. Every ship captain, every squadron leader, every individual soldier was trained to think and act independently. Admiral Kim, watching the battle from Earth's command center, received reports from across the galaxy. Resistance movements that had been hiding in the shadows for decades were suddenly coming into the open. They were using human tactics and weapons to fight back against their oppressors. "Ma'am, we're getting requests for assistance from 47 different worlds," reported her aide. "They all want to know how to build our defensive systems." "Give them what they need," Kim ordered. "But make sure they understand that these weapons are for defense only. We're not trying to build an empire of our own." This was something that confused many species throughout the galaxy. The humans had the power to become the new rulers of known space, but they didn't seem to want that. Instead, they offered their technology freely to anyone who promised to use it to protect innocent people. On the Dominion flagship, Commander Yoon sat in his command chair like a man in a nightmare. Half of his fleet was destroyed or crippled. The other half was retreating. In disorder, his perfect military machine had been taken apart by a species that shouldn't have been able to build a decent spaceship. "Sir, we're receiving surrender offers from 12 different star systems," Lieutenant Han reported quietly. "They're asking for protection from the human forces. Surrender offers." Yoon almost laughed. "They think the humans are going to invade them." "Apparently, sir. They don't understand why the humans would share their weapons instead of using them for conquest." Yoon understood now what made these humans so dangerous. Every other species in the galaxy fought for the same reasons the Dominion did: to gain power, to take resources, to rule over others. But the humans were fighting for something completely different. They were fighting to protect their freedom and the freedom of others. It was a type of warfare that the Dominion had never encountered before. When you fought to conquer, you could be satisfied with victory. But when you fought to protect, you never stopped fighting until everyone was safe. Captain Lee, commanding the human fleet from her flagship, opened a communication channel to the retreating Dominion forces. Her voice was broadcast to every ship in both fleets, and from there to every world in the galaxy. "Commander Yoon, this is your final warning. Leave our system now and never return. But understand this: we're not just protecting Earth anymore. We're protecting every world that asks for our help. The age of conquest is over." On thousands of worlds and millions of homes, people who had lived their entire lives under Dominion rule heard those words and felt something they had almost forgotten. Hope, the Cathera Dominion, had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years through fear and superior technology. But now they faced something they had never encountered before: a species that fought not for conquest, but for the simple right to be free. And across the galaxy, that idea was spreading faster than any weapon or warship could travel. The tide had turned, and there was no going back. 6 months after the Battle of Seoul, the galaxy looked completely different. The mighty Cathara Dominion, which had ruled for 3,000 years, was crumbling like an old building in an earthquake. World after world was declaring independence, and for the first time in centuries, they were winning their freedom. Captain Lee stood in the great assembly hall that orbited Earth's moon. The building was new, constructed from materials donated by dozens of different species. Representatives from hundreds of worlds filled the chamber, their voices creating a symphony of different languages, all speaking about the same thing: hope. The Galactic Defense Alliance had grown from a simple idea into something that was changing the entire galaxy. Unlike the old Dominion, which ruled through fear and force, the alliance was built on a simple principle: every world had the right to govern itself. "We gather today not as conquerors, but as protectors," Lee addressed the crowded assembly. Her words were translated into thousands of languages and broadcast to every corner of known space. "The technology that freed us belongs to all of us. The knowledge that defeated tyranny is yours to use and improve." In the audience, the Zilani delegate stood to speak. Her world had been one of the first to be liberated after Earth's victory, and now it was helping other planets build their own defenses. 6 months ago, my people were slaves," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "Our children worked in Dominion factories from dawn to dusk. Our elderly were left to die when they could no longer be useful. Today our children go to school, and our elderly are honored for their wisdom. Similar stories came from representatives across the galaxy. The mining world of Korvac had built its own defense fleet using human designs. The agricultural planet of Thesa was now feeding its own people instead of shipping all its food to Dominion worlds. Everywhere freedom was spreading like wildfire. On Mars, in a maximum security prison. Former Commander Yoon watched the proceedings through a holographic display. His guard, Admiral Kim, stood beside him. The two had spent many hours talking during his imprisonment. Jean was slowly beginning to understand what had really happened. You could have ruled everything, Yoon said quietly. Your technology. Your tactics, your weapons. You could have replaced us as the masters of the galaxy. Kim shook her head. That's exactly why we won, and you lost. We never wanted to rule anyone. We just wanted to be free to live our own lives. But power, double quotes, Yoon started to say. Real power isn't the ability to force others to obey you, Kim interrupted. No, power is the ability to help others become strong enough to protect themselves. On the display, representatives from former Dominion colonies were signing the Galactic Defense Charter. It was a document that promised mutual protection and shared knowledge. But it also guaranteed that each world would remain independent and self-governing. The Zilani delegate cast the final vote. The motion passes unanimously, announced Captain Lee. The age of galactic tyranny is over. Today, we begin the age of galactic cooperation. The assembly erupted in celebration. Beings from 1,000 different worlds cheered together, their voices joining in languages that had been forbidden under Dominion rule. For the first time in 3 millennia, the galaxy was free, but the celebration was interrupted by an urgent message from the Outer Rim. Captain O, commanding a patrol ship near the edge of known space, reported that Dominion forces were massing for a final desperate attack. They're gathering what's left of their fleet, O reported via hologram. Maybe 200 ships from various sectors. Looks like they want to make one last attempt to reclaim their empire. The assembly fell silent. Even weakened, 200 Dominion warships represented a serious threat to any single world. Captain Lee stood up slowly.
How many ships can we gather for defense?
The answer came from all around the chamber. The Zilani delegate stood 50. Ships from our sector, the Korvac representative. 30 mining vessels converted to warships. The Thesa spokesman. 20 agricultural transports with defensive systems. Within minutes, it became clear that the Alliance could field over 1,000 ships from dozens of different worlds. But more importantly, each ship would be crewed by people fighting to protect their freedom, not by slaves forced to serve their masters. Let them come, Lee said firmly. We'll show them what free people can do when they work together. As news of the impending battles spread throughout the galaxy, something remarkable happened. Species that had been enemies under Dominion rule began working together. Former slave worlds sent supplies to their neighbors. Scientists from different planets shared their knowledge to improve defensive systems. The Dominion had ruled through division and fear, keeping different species separate and suspicious of each other. The Alliance was built on cooperation and trust. It was a completely different way of organizing a galactic civilization. Admiral Kim, still watching from Mars, smiled as she saw the preparations begin. Commander Yoon, you're about to witness something that hasn't happened in 3,000 years. What's that? Yoon asked. You're going to see what happens when free people decide to defend their freedom together. The final battle was coming. But this time, it would be different. This time, it would be a battle between those who fought to enslave and those who fought to remain free. And across the galaxy, everyone knew which side would win. The new dawn had arrived, and it was brighter than anyone had dared to imagine.